Hello, Trail Seeker, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. I'm really excited for you to hear today's interview. Dr. Kelly Brogan blew my mind. You are going to love listening to her story of healing. She was an MD who was used to prescribing drugs to every single patient, knowing that she was doing a lot of really good in their lives until she had Hashimoto's, and she became sick, and she thought to herself, I don't want to be on drugs for the rest of my life. And this is what started her journey over 10 years ago. And then working with natural medicine, she healed her body and has gone on to help all her patients do the same thing. So she goes through her story, but she teaches us some wonderful principles today, emotional, mental, spiritual, excellent lessons that we can all learn. As I was interviewing her, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a writer downer. That's a writer downer. I'm so glad we transcribed these episodes now. So you can go to learntruehealth.com in a week or two when we have this up on the site, totally transcribed, because you're probably going to want to read through some things she say. The things that she says is so profound. So I know you're going to really enjoy today's interview. But before we get started, I definitely want to take a minute to introduce you to one of my nearest and dearest friends. I was about to say Dr. Jennifer Saltzman. That's so funny. I always do that.
It was going to be until I found another way.
Right? Exactly. Well, so Jen Saltzman, I've had her on the show twice before, sort of, because you interviewed me and then I interviewed you. So, but 2 episodes. So listeners definitely want to go back and listen. What numbers were that?
So 179 and 180 is my interviewing of you. And then I'm going to say 33 was one you did with me on maybe supplement confusion.
Way back in the day.
And there was an early 19 where you interviewed me in 2 episodes, but I can't remember the name. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the numbers.
Cool. We'll make sure that we link. So you've been on the show. Why did I think twice? Geez, you've been on the show like a bunch.
Because you forgot about ancient history when you first started.
Right, exactly. The early days. Well, so most of the episodes are on iTunes, but the last 80 or so episodes have been bumped off because iTunes has a max of 300. And of course, this is episode 378. And so listeners can go to learntruehealth.com and check out all the earlier episodes, which are there. And I'm going to make sure that in the show notes of today's podcast, all the episodes where Jen was with me on the show is linked. She's taught Pilates for over 20 years, was a dancer, and in the last 10 years or so has been an expert in health coaching and supplementation. Jen and I work close together, and she is the driving force behind takeyoursupplements.com. You guys keep hearing me talk about it, and that's so when you go to takeyoursupplements.com and you put in your name, email address, and phone number, the person you hear from within about 24 hours is Jennifer Saltzman. And so I wanted to introduce you guys. She's amazing. She's so loving, so compassionate, and she will talk to you and help you to figure out exactly what supplements are right for you and help you to dial in exactly what you need within your budget. But Jen, I just wanted to introduce you to listeners for all the new ones that don't know who you are, because they should know how amazing you are. So if you just want to say hi to them and let them know what it's like working with you at takeyoursupplements.com.
Sure. So, hi, everybody out there. I'm just so incredibly grateful that I know all of you because I talk to many of you. Absolutely adore Ashley's podcast. I get so much amazing feedback, and it's just such a blessing to have this forum where the information is getting out there. And I know how grateful you all are to have this. And so it's just an honor to be together with Ashley and her wonderful husband, Duffy, here in the studio. I just wanted to say that, when I work with people with the supplement program, we have the need for certain basic nutrition that we absolutely have to have. And if we don't have it, I kind of equate it with like drinking water and eating good food and things like that. But it's never going to be like you have to do this. We work really individually with folks to figure out what their budget is, what's going on with their health profile, and we have lots of great options. So just wanted to take a moment to say that when I work with people, it's a very supportive, nurturing kind of a process together. We figure out what's going on with people. We do a brief free health evaluation, and then we move forward based on what seems to be, I give my 2 cents as well, but it's a partnership that I work with people together to achieve their goals and work with whatever budget they've got going on. And anyway, I just adore having this relationship with Ashley and being a part of this podcast in some small way that I am. And I know both she and I have had amazing health recovery with the supplements that we work with. And so it's just a blessing. And anyway, it's an honor to be here.
And if you're interested in taking some high quality supplements at affordable prices, or if you're a health coach and you're looking to incorporate supplements into your business, Jen can actually mentor you as well in that.
Right. Yeah. So I'll just say a word about that. So a lot of the people that I do work with, they're very passionate about this mission as well. And they've, of course, been avid listeners to the podcast. And I would say at least a third of the people that I talk to express an interest of wanting to help other people with this information. Maybe they're already sharing the podcast. I'm sure they are, and doing a lot of other things. But we also train people in a very simple fashion. It's not, it doesn't take years or anything. It's just we train people and coach them to be able to help their friends and family or their sphere of influence with this knowledge of the essentialness of certain nutrition. So I do a monthly training. There's lots of different trainings I do. But anyway, there's an opportunity to get involved on a small level, a large level, whether it's, just a passion to help others or whether somebody's looking to, change what they're doing with their time and their energy and figuring out how to generate income in a different kind of way. There's lots of opportunities to basically be part of a bigger mission is the way I like to look at it.
Well, yeah, and since about 20% of my listeners are holistic health experts and many of them are health coaches or work on that kind of level, I know that they're very interested in having that tool in their tool belt, and you give away
Absolutely.
so much of your resources and your time and your training,
Yep.
and you are so passionate to continue to spread this information and help people on that level. I love the liquid minerals. It's probably my favorite thing. The liquid minerals are so bioavailable. For listeners who don't know my story, these supplements help me reverse polycystic ovarian syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and chronic adrenal fatigue. And I was told I'd never have kids, and I was infertile. And of course, through the diet changes and through these supplements, I was able to reverse that and conceive my very healthy 4.5-year-old boy who's 4.5 going on 40. So yeah, thank you so much, Jen, for coming here. Jen's been staying over. She lives in the middle of nowhere and in Washington, in gorgeous, the state of gorgeous Washington, but in the middle of nowhere. So she came over to stay here for a few days. And since I was recording a podcast, I said, jump on the mic and say hi to everyone. So thanks, Jen, for saying hi.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great having you here.
Thanks.
She just got out of the sunlight and sauna. Did you like that?
Yes, I did. I got out of the sunlight and sauna. I had the fabulous Ashley James magic stew.
Vegetable stew.
I'm drinking the liquid mineral magic
Right now. You've soaked in magnesium. I'm going to get you to do a
I'm about
platinum.
to eat some energy bits.
Oh
if
yeah,
I can
you've
find
got
them on this desk.
Yeah, I got energy bits on the desk. That's right. And then you're gonna do a platinum energy system foot detox soak later. So this is like
I'm
a
at the
spa
Ashley
day.
James spa.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Jen. And guys, I know you're just going to love today's interview. Thank you so much for being a listener. Thank you so much for sharing this podcast with all those that you care about. Today's one of those episodes you're going to want to share, especially to all the mom friends out there, because she says, Dr. Kelly says some things that just touched my heart and just made me want to get everyone to listen to this episode. So I know you'll feel the same way. Excellent. Thank you so much and have yourself a fantastic rest of your day. Enjoy today's episode. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 378. I am so excited to have Dr. Kelly Brogan on the show today. Her website is kellybroganmd.com. She has some wonderful books and a great book coming out, Own Yourself. Kelly, it is such a pleasure to have you here today. I love the work that you do. We here at Learn True Health are about empowering the listeners, and you have an amazing ability to help women and men and children, because you've written a children's book, but help all of us to be able to learn how to merge the spiritual with our physical health and our mental and emotional health, and how to take care of ourselves on those levels. And we're not taught that in school. We're not taught that in society. We really need to step it up and advocate for ourselves. And you are going to help us do that today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful introduction. I appreciate it. And I'm grateful to be here.
Absolutely. Now, you wrote a book with your daughter, Sophia, A Time for
Yes.
Rain.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds amazing. What's that book about?
Yeah. So we were just kind of sitting around one afternoon and it was super rainy out. This is when I lived in the Northeast before I got out of jail and made it down to Miami. And she always, as a child, loved to write books. So she was writing books. She wrote a book called The Power of Me. I think she was 3.
Oh.
Anyway, so she used to love to write books, and we, put together this story. Honestly, it was one of those experiences where it just kind of like came through. And I ended up self-publishing it because I couldn't get a book deal with any of, the major publishers. And it's essentially about, the power of seemingly negative emotions and their role in the greater web of existence and the connection of all beings. And I know that for me, the most powerful application of my work in my life is in my role as a mother. Walking the walk of my work in my role as a mother requires me to grow my self big enough to hold emotions that scare me. And in this way, as I grow that capacity, I am able to show up to my daughters through love rather than needing to control their behavior so that it conforms to my very narrow band of comfort, emotionally. And so it's really, I think, in service of helping parents to create that culture in the household.
Everything you just said, I could spend an entire week on doing interviews on just like unpacking what you just said. Oh my gosh, it so resonates with me as a parent and needing to like put my ego aside and my, what I think the world should look like, and go, do I really need to like force our son into this mold, or can he be his own, and is that okay? And, so I have to constantly ask myself, like, am I disciplining him because this is what like it's healthy for him to do, or is this what I think, am I stifling him? So I'm walking that line with you. I totally get it. So Is A Time for Rain a children's book or a book written for anyone?
It's actually a picture book, and it's kind of like an Eastern parable, has that kind of a flavor, and it's obviously fictional. But I've been told that, by many people who've read it, that it's actually probably the most accessible story for adults, that it sort of delivers home the message of the work we'll talk about today. So I guess it's for adults and children, but it is a picture book, and the illustrations are extraordinary. We partnered with this incredible artist, so it's very beautiful.
Cool. And how old was your daughter when she wrote it with you?
She was 8.
Oh my gosh. I have to get this book for my son, who's 4.5 on going on 30. He's already telling me how he's going to have a wife and raise his kids. It's so funny. Telling me
take care of you. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he didn't mention that. He said I'm not going to live with him. So he's 4.5.
He's individuating. Yes. You have to support that.
Already. Yes. Now your next book was, or the book that you wrote on your own, not with the help of your daughter, was A Mind of Your Own. Tell us a bit about that book.
So it's interesting because, we'll talk about how I have a second book coming out now, and the energetic signature of these books is so different, even though one is essentially the sequel to the other. I wrote A Mind of Your Own in the years following my, I guess, intellectual, physical, and psychic awakening, so to speak, that was really triggered when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis postpartum my first daughter. And at that time, I was specialized as a psychiatrist in prescribing to pregnant and breastfeeding women. So I was in this very, very niche specialty, obviously such a diehard believer in the pharmaceutical management model that I, endeavored to prescribe to this very vulnerable population and, thought I was helping, of course, right? The way we do as when we just kind of follow directives without questioning them. And so I think this is a very common experience. Probably many of your listeners have had this experience where, if we're trained in the conventional fold, we really only question the foundation of our education when we bump up against the glass ceiling ourselves of what that paradigm has to offer. And so when I was diagnosed, this voice just kind of came up in me and I said, I don't want to take Synthroid for the rest of my life. Meanwhile, I've been writing prescriptions, for years at that point. And suddenly it wasn't acceptable to me, for me. And so I ended up going to a naturopath, which was so unlike me, so out of character at that point. That's when you have to believe that there are moments where you're guided beyond your executive functioning. So I went to a naturopath. I saw on paper my antibodies go from the high 2000s in a TSH of 20 into the normal range in black and white. And all I had done was adjust some of my lifestyle choices. So, because of my temperament, I didn't say, oh, well, that's lovely, and just keep on. I was enraged. And I said, how is it? I've studied my ass off. I've spent every Saturday for so many years on PubMed. I read every primary paper. I'm comfortable with statistics. How is it that I have never been taught that it is possible to put an autoimmune condition into remission? And I had 1 hour of nutrition education in my entire Ivy League training. Right. So I was pretty pissed. And at that time, as the universe would have it, a colleague gave me a book called Anatomy of an Epidemic, which had come out around that time by Robert Whitaker, investigative journalist. And I read it because I was already feeling dissonance around the body of knowledge that I had worked so hard to acquire. So I was open to it. And when I read it, it so condemned, again, through non-industry published literature, so condemned my practice of psychiatry as I had known it up until that point that I never started a patient on a prescription ever again to this day. So that was almost 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, it had that level of impact. It was life-changing, obviously, not only for me, but for many who I've been able to support since then. And so, I wrote A Mind of Your Own from that righteous energy. And I said, I am a believer in informed consent. Mm-hmm. Here's what I've learned about not only psychiatric medications, but actually many sacred cows in the pharmaceutical, kind of warehouse, whether it's birth control or antibiotics or acid blockers or statins or over-the-counter painkillers or vaccines. I spent endless hours, actually calculated something over 10,000 hours, just nearly obsessively researching everything I hadn't been told with this fire in my gut about how it could be possible that I put this much into my training and just only learned, a keyhole version of the scientific reality that was available to me. So I thought, when folks read this book, no one's ever going to touch a medication again, right? Because the information is in there. And how could they? And of course, I matured to recognize that that's not actually how life works, right? That we actually don't change our minds through information access. And what I began to see was, wow, this book and the testimonials that we were getting back from the book could also not be explained through information transmission alone. I couldn't possibly reconcile some of the, disease-defying, medication eliminating outcomes that we were hearing about firsthand from individuals who simply read the book. So something more had to be going on here. And that's when I began to explore the role of mindset, belief, and really a kind of metaphysical orientation towards reality that I believe underpins our experience of illness and our relationship to the nature of healing.
I love it. And so now your book that's coming out so soon that most listeners listening to this will be able to buy it. It's right now on pre-order, but it's coming out in the next few days. So listeners can just go buy it right now. Own Yourself is that empowerment tool out of your 10 years of experience kind of on the other side, right? From allopathic medicine. But I want to just go back to that moment when you realized you will never prescribe another drug again.
Yeah.
Did you feel naked as a doctor? All of a sudden your tool belt was taken away.
So that's why I feel very, I don't know, spiritually supported and guided on my path, because had I read that, had I just been, an intellectually curious individual, I've always been a bibliophile. I've always loved books. So let's say I read it, but I hadn't had about a year of my own healing journey under my belt. You better believe I would have conveniently dismissed that information, the way that we do when we feel, when we encounter information, even through, the rubric of science that is inconvenient. It's our natural tendency to dismiss it. But I didn't, and I aligned with it because I had already seen that there was more to the story than I'd been exposed to, and I'd felt that. I felt that in my body. Anything from, when I changed my diet in an effort to heal my Hashimoto's, I could feel. It wasn't just about the numbers on the paper, although that did help, instill this belief system in me, but I could feel the difference in my body. I didn't even know how much was off. I didn't know that it wasn't normal to poop once a week. These kinds of things had never occurred to me because I didn't have any relationship to health or wellness. I only knew about, disease entities, and I knew that I didn't have any of them. So what do I care what I eat, or about exercising? I'd always been naturally thin, so I had no motivation to do that. Meditating, that never occurred to me. I don't think I even heard the word. And, the concept of perhaps there being risks associated with, dyeing my hair black for so many years, or using secret deodorant or whatever it might have been, I would have easily dismissed the irrelevance of each of those concerns as being, vanishingly small. But it was because I had a felt experience of how these lifestyle choices, so my day-to-day selection of foods, how they can empower me to have an experience of my health that wasn't even offered to me by the allopathic model. I believe that simple kind of lived experience has the capacity to disrupt an entire paradigmatic mindset and invite you into one that is fundamentally more aligned with your truth.
Absolutely. So there you were. You've changed your diet. You've changed some lifestyle. However, how many months did it take you to work with the naturopath to go from full-on Hashimoto's to full-on remission?
About 8 months.
Okay. So in 8 months, you're feeling better. Every month you're starting to feel better. Almost on a daily basis, you're noticing just like the clouds are lifting.
Oh, it happened within weeks. Yeah. Clinically,
beautiful.
I felt better within weeks. Yeah.
So you really got the impact that, and then it probably kept hitting you, right? Like, I can't believe it. I spent, however many years you went to some major schools. You went to NYU, NYU Medical Center. What is it? MIT, Cornell. Like you have the best education. And yet, like you said, 1 hour of nutritional training and you didn't know that pooping once a week isn't normal because
Right.
and we give our bodies and give over our power to our primary care physician, right? Because
Yes.
we feel helpless we believe that they know everything, or
That's
our
right.
pediatrician, they know best for what's for our child, or they know our doctor knows best what's for our body. And their education is lacking. Their education is full of information, but it's not full of information to help us become the healthiest versions of ourselves.
And you know what? That's okay, right? Because I like to say, you wouldn't go to a butcher to learn about veganism, right? So it's absolutely okay that allopathic medicine is offering what it is from the belief system and mindset that it is, right? Because the doctors live in this mindset, the patients live in this mindset, and in some way, everyone is served. And the challenge, arises when other paradigms are not allowed to coexist.
Thank you. Yes.
Right? That's when we kind of get into the totalitarianism and even fascism of the dominant medical orthodoxy.
That's really well put, because our rights are being challenged state by state when it comes to our choice. Some children are being medically kidnapped because parents want to choose a different treatment. I mean, it's really scary. So we need to advocate that we need to have freedom. We need to have medical freedom to be able to choose the right course for us. And I don't believe any government should impose medicine on someone who doesn't want it. That's really scary when we get into that. So you're here though to teach us about self-empowerment, because you went through this 10-year journey. And I mean, I would have freaked out if I had gone through your education and spent years, helping people with prescriptions, and then having this experience and realizing that my tool belt is gone. The prescriptions are not really helping. And so what did you do to end up helping your patients? How did you shift your education? You already shifted your mindset, but how did you shift your toolbox to be able to then help them?
So it was an iterative process, because I first decided that I was going to offer all of my patients, based on the scientific literature I'd been exposed to through Robert Whitaker's work, to, the opportunity to taper off their medication. Now, I had never been taught how to do this. And arguably, there is not a psychiatrist on the planet today who has been taught how to do this, right? So if any psychiatrists or other, prescribing clinicians are offering this service to their patients, it's because they taught themselves how to do it, right? Or they were taught, as I was, by grassroots activists and patients themselves who had endeavored into this territory before I applied it to my practice. So I offered my patients that opportunity, and that's when I learned and began to take a deeper dive into I learned about the dependency inducing nature of psychiatric medications, because I was essentially running something like an outpatient rehab center, where my patients were becoming medically disabled at a rate that had me filling out disability forms beyond my capacity. My pager was going off all the time. My entire quality of life shifted. And this was before 2014, when it appeared in the medical literature that psychotropic medications, when they are prescribed for longer than about 2 months, have the capacity to induce a withdrawal phenomenon that can be protracted and complex. And this is not just the benzodiazepines or barbiturates. This is the antidepressants. This is the so-called mood stabilizers. This is the so-called antipsychotics, right? So it's actually all of the categories, the stimulants. And I had, several years of witnessing that. So it wasn't until I foregrounded the basic lifestyle changes that, through the scientific research I had done, I began to understand were ways to send the autonomic nervous system a profound and comprehensive, kind of like a 360-degree signal of safety. It wasn't until I said, no, this month comes first before we touch your medication, that I began to have really robust outcomes. And then, later in my process, I had the great privilege of working with the now late Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, who, for those who aren't familiar with his very important work, he's one of the only clinicians the world over who had 27 years of experience putting terminal cancers and degenerative illness into long-term, multi-decade remission through a diet and detox-based protocol. And so I was the only MD he ever mentored.
Wow.
And in the last year of his life, I had his eyes on my work and on my protocol. And he offered me in addition to contextualizing the dietary approach that I take in about 12 different dietary options that are available, he helped me to understand that context, but he also offered me the now notorious coffee enema, which I have operationalized to extraordinary ends in my practice and online program, Vital Mind Reset. So it was because of him that I added that to the protocol. And then I saw the medication tapers that were taking, multi-year, timeframes diminished to multi-month
Oh my
because of that
gosh.
single intervention in the way that he applied it. Yeah.
So he helped you to he helped train you to
Yeah.
then pass on the information to your patients about how to do healthy detoxes, like using coffee enemas. But also you mentioned 12 different dietary protocols.
Yeah.
He helped you tweak those diets for detoxification.
Well, he used 12 different diets
Oh, okay.
based on a system that was refined from his mentor, William Kelly, that derived from Weston Price and Pottinger and others, that essentially leverages this understanding that we develop in such concert with the natural world that our nervous systems adapt to the ecology, right? So the temperature, the types of foods that are available. And then now we're all in this big melting pot. But that if you look at the Eskimos versus the Amazonians versus the Incans versus the Swiss sheep herders, they all thrive on very, very, very different diets, right? And so there are people who are of these lineages, not only ethnically, but in terms of their autonomic dominance, he would call it, right? So he actually helped me to understand why this very basic ancestral template that I had used in my own healing, but that also worked in a little bit of a different way with my patients, why it worked. And most confounding was, how is it that the patients that I was working with were getting better with a red meat inclusive diet? And, this was a bit before the paleo craze, so I didn't have the comfort of that labeling to fall back on necessarily, but I did understand that the patients that I worked with in clinical practice and now see at scale in my online program, that these are people who are uniquely suited on a nervous system level to heal through that kind of diet. And he helped me to see that's because they are most likely, by and large, what he called parasympathetic dominance. I go into this a little bit more in Own Yourself, but simply it's that, these individuals have certain characteristics on a physical level, like they're susceptible to certain kinds of cancers, like liquid tumors, lymphoma, or leukemia. They have a highly innervated pancreas, so they are vulnerable to reactive hypoglycemia, for example, those ups and downs of blood sugar throughout the day where they get hangry, if they don't eat within 4 to 6 hours, but they wake up not hungry, and they might wake up during the night, have sleep interruption because of that they also have easy weight gain, right? So he would say they look at a piece of toast and gain 5 pounds. And that they have certain disease labels that come their way. So hypothyroidism, multiple chemical sensitivity, fibromyalgia, depression, anxiety. These are the folks who are often diagnosed with ADHD, allergies, asthma, and autoimmunity. Although obviously that's become so ubiquitous, I imagine he would say today that this spreads across the entire chart, autoimmunity. So, and that these folks characterologically have things in common, that they tend to be night people. They tend to be free thinkers and artists. Like he would tell me that Picasso was undoubtedly one. And they have tremendous capacity for nuance and kind of outside of the box thinking relative to the sympathetic dominants, who are kind of the more rigid lines and levers kinds of people, like everything is kind of like, tell me the rules and I'm going to stay within them. And it helped me to see, wow, that describes just about every patient I've ever seen. And it helps me to understand why they would light up like a Christmas tree when I would say that they can eat red meat on this diet. I think some of them would come in thinking I was going to ask them to do a juice fast or a water fast or something, and they would learn to the contrary. And Nick would always say, patients want to eat the diet that is going to heal them. They desire it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been my experience that we're so kind of clouded by so many addictive relationships to food and beverages that we don't have a clear channel to our intuitive preferences. And so my adaptation of his very nuanced approach is to really start with a scalable template that controls, obviously not only for inflammatory foods and including processed sugars, et cetera, and amplifies nutrient density, but that also allows you to experience addictive-free eating so that you can really clear that channel and begin to understand your preferences. I remember when I engaged, this kind of dietary change, there were whole months where I would eat 15 radishes a day for months, or carry a cucumber everywhere I went. Or I'm in this, even now, 10 years later, I'm in a broccoli rabe phase where I eat probably 2 bushels of them a day.
Nice.
And you start to get into an understanding that what you prefer is what you need. What you want is what you need, within the parameters of whole food. So it's actually super liberating.
Yeah. My first time doing a sugar fast, so removing sugar totally from the diet, I could not believe the reset that happened, and that sugar is in everything. It's in everything. I couldn't believe it. And then, now I'm whole foods plant-based, and so I've been healing my relationship with food, and in the show I've had lots of people on about overeating and emotional eating, and there's definitely an emotional component, but there's definitely a physiological component too, because when we start to eat hyper palatable foods with salt, sugar, and oil, anything that's in fast food, for example, it's designed. They have scientists figuring out how to make the food more hyper palatable to excite the neurotoxins, to excite the neurochemicals, to excite the brain, and the brain lights up like a Christmas tree, like you're on cocaine, so that you enjoy it and you want more. It's like going to a theme park for your mouth and your brain. That's right, and it's just destroying the body in the process. But so there, I when I went whole foods plant-based, it was kind of like going in a very small, like a 1% experience, like going off of heroin, because I had to get off of the salt, sugar, oil, flour, hyper palatable foods that, I wanted to overeat, and foods that, no matter how much I ate, like Chinese food, for example, I could finish all the Chinese food and still want more. I'd have no room left.
Totally.
And I'd still want more. There's no amount that would make me feel satisfied. And that's do that enough times, and I got it's not, my body doesn't, it's not healthy. My body doesn't actually thrive on this. There's something, if there's a food that no matter what, I can't get enough of it, no matter what I eat it, then I know that that's not a healing food for me. But when I made this vegetable stew, I posted it in our Learn True Health Facebook group, and I can't believe how quickly it fills me up and then satisfies me. And then I'm done. And then it's there's no cravings. My body feels it's buzzing with energy, but not a bad buzz, a good buzz. And my body feels calm. It totally turns on the parasympathetic for me and just gets me into that calm state. And then I'm not thinking about food. I'm not panicking about food. So I'm hearing what you're saying, because when we eat foods that our body loves, like you said, two bushels of broccoli raw a day, you probably feel full and comfortable, and your body feels just well, and you're not craving anymore, right?
This is exactly, it's part of the reclamation process, right? So, we just put out a quiz, where are you giving your power away? You can find out in a minute, because there's so many of these places in our lives where we have, perhaps unconsciously given permission to an external, entity or agent or person to hold the power that is ours to reclaim. And, I use the same kind of example where I remember when I used to live in Manhattan and I was in my training, I used to go to this pizza place on the corner, as you do when you live in Manhattan, and I would get 2 slices of pepperoni pizza, put hot chili flakes on it. I remember I could taste it in my mouth now. And I would take one bite and I would literally be overcome by this feeling that I could eat 12,000 of those pieces of pizza. And it's actually a terrible feeling state to cope with because it's like you at war with you and there's no winning. Right. So, that's why it was no surprise when I dove into the literature and I found, okay, one method of quieting neuroinflammation is to eliminate gluten and dairy, is to eliminate the proteins, gliadin and casein from your diet because they literally plug into opiate receptors in your brain. So if you can detox, which, takes sometimes about 10 days of almost going through something like a flu-like experience, depending on how much of those foods you're eating. I mean, I was eating all day, 5 times a day, probably bread and cheese, and once you're through that window, it's like you're free. And now when I eat food, it's because I'm hungry and I eat it and it tastes good. And then I move on with my life.
Yes, yes, it's a
truly
freedom.
liberating.
It's the freedom it's given you. I had an interview on how addictive dairy is, and that it's designed. I mean, it's intelligent. Nature's intelligent. God, nature, universe isn't the intelligence is that we want the calf or the baby to suckle, and so milk from any mammal is addictive. And it's
that's right.
But milk from a cow is supposed to turn a 60-pound calf into a 400-pound cow. So why are we drinking? Why are we drinking something that's supposed to make us balloon out and become as big as a cow? Which I think is hilarious. But yeah, it is addictive. So people really fight about giving up their cheese, and cheese is just concentrated milk addiction. That was like the last thing for people to give up. I remember sitting on the weekends with my husband eating like an entire brick of Tillamook cheese back in the day. Yeah. But we went gluten-free and dairy-free, and it's made a world of difference. And then we went whole foods, plant-based, and it allowed clarity in my body. Like you said, it calms down the nervous system. It calms down that stress response. And it's amazing how much clarity I can work through the emotions around food so much easier now that I have eliminated the foods that were keeping me in that excited state. So
absolutely,
I love that that's part of your
I
program.
couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I'm often asked, well, because I have a bit of let's say a strict, is probably a euphemistic way to put it, but a strict approach to, this month-long protocol. And it's a very yang energy that I bring to it, where it's like, go big or go home, really do it, commit to it. Every single choice is consistent with your commitment. It's 1 month of your life. You're never going to do it again, but do it, right? And so many people are like, oh, well, this can't be appropriate for people with eating disorders because, they're struggling with restriction. Often. And this concept of deprivation being very triggering to them. Right. And, I sort of marvel over the fact that about, I would say, a third of the women I've worked with over the years have identified as having some type of eating disorder previous to our work together. And as the conventional model when it comes to disordered eating is to basically, kind of inure the patient to processed foods, meaning that this marker of success for eating disorder treatment is that you can eat a donut and not have to purge it. Or, if you're restricting that you can eat a piece of pizza and not feel terrible about having eaten it, right? Or not feel out of control. So it's like being forced to eat junk food. I mean, it's amazing. I don't know how many people are familiar with conventional treatment of eating disorders, but it's quite amazing. Like the way that in conventional psychiatry, it's approached, like that's considered a marker of success if you eat junk food and you're okay with it. But, if you don't know the science behind the ways in which these processed foods interact with the nervous and inflammatory systems, what a Herculean ask that is of a patient. It's quite a different healing, model to set the conditions for eating to become, simply about nourishment, And then whatever else it might be is something that you can, cultivate witness consciousness around and self-compassion around and curiosity, like how interesting that, when we finish this interview, I might make myself a matcha feeling like, I did my job and now I can relax. How interesting that is, right? So you begin to watch the ways in which we can infuse even healthy foods with a certain kind of energy around like the ways we self-domesticate, right? We keep ourselves in line and in order, and we give ourselves little treats and rewards. And but it's something you can look at once that foundation is underfoot.
Yes, exactly. Because the foundation is get the body to a place where it's nutrified and it's in the nervous system isn't hyper excited from those foods that are designed to really mess with the brain. As you were talking, I was just imagining someone like going to a rehab clinic because they've been addicted to meth, and part of the rehab is we're going to like give you small amounts of meth and you have to you're going to only take one hit off that meth pipe, or however people do meth, or I don't know. I don't even know how people do meth, but basically take one small hit and then you have to like stop and not binge on the meth. And that's your rehab. And it's just like, really? It doesn't make sense. But what we really want to do is come to that place where, like you said, with the mindset is, we're looking at nutrifying the body and we're looking at what foods, because everything we put in our mouth builds us up or tears us down. We're either in an anabolic state or a catabolic state. And so you're looking at food as someone's medicine, as someone's drug, and how it affects the brain. And you're the perfect doctor to do it, having helped people manage their physical and emotional health and mental health for so many years. So do you do 12 different diets depending on their circumstance, or do you have, can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So I have one template, which is the only template I've ever used for 10 years. So I have a decent amount of experience with it. And what I found, because when my mentor died, it was one of the greater spiritual crises of my life. And I thought, well, how am I supposed to proceed, without his guidance and mentorship, and there's so much more I could have learned. And how am I going to help my patients know which of the 12 diets is theirs? And I believe that the era of kind of the master student, even the doctor patient, is fast fading, and that we're coming into a zeitgeist around self-healing and self-authority, which is obviously the spirit of my new book. And I have been shown that it really works, right? It really works to take that approach. And so the template is meant to put you in touch with your own innate preferences. And then from there, you figure it out. And I have guidelines, obviously, for how to do that. But for the most part, it's something that you figure out. So no longer are you working within Kelly Brogan's template, right? Now it's your show. But I found that the 30 days of very strict adherence and compliance work as something of a portal to that place of self-authority over nutrition and food. I will say, that because I give permission around animal foods, most of the folks who are helped by my protocol do prefer that. And so that can be an important indicator. And I'm not saying prefer ethically, right? Because that's a very complex variable here that I'm in no position to address. I mean, it's not what I'm here to talk about. But on a very kind of gut level, right? Mm-hmm. They do want to eat a steak, right? And so whether they eat red meat twice a day, or that after the protocol they go on to eat it once a month, or maybe never, is something that they determine in this self-tailoring process, because there are other elements of the protocol that involve obviously detox and contemplative practice or stress response healing that also, I think, kind of co-conspire to create the conditions for you to be able to relate to your own body and dialogue with your body in a way that wasn't available to you when you had brain fog and bloating and insomnia and your hair was falling out and your knee is hurting and, all of the ways that our body says, hey, remember me, like, can we please talk? Those symptoms, once they quiet down, which often happens very quickly, it just becomes so much easier to hear.
And this template, this guide, that's in your book, the one that's coming out, Own Yourself?
Yes. So it's in A Mind of Your Own as well, although that was the kind of, I guess, one of the earlier iterations of it before we had scaled it in our online program, which is I basically took what I do in clinical practice, I put it online, and thousands of people have tried it out. And the outcomes that we have from there make it look like I'm doing something wrong in my private practice. It was actually very humbling on an ego level, for me to see like, oh, okay, so the less contact that an individual has with me with the same instructions, the better. I mean, literally, because
Wow.
we're just constantly in the publishing process of, we just published remission of Graves' disease through lifestyle choices in a peer-reviewed index journal. And we're constantly writing up these cases because they're so extraordinary. And in the case of that one paper, it's never been reported in the medical literature. So that's just because nobody's bothered to write it up, obviously. But, it's pretty profound. So what I've now taken and put back into this book, Own Yourself, is the refined protocol. And it's funny, I was with my partner Sayer the other night, and he was reading the book, and he's like, wow, you're really giving away the goods in this book, huh? Because, our program is $1,000 program, and it's for very special people, I think, who are called to heal the seemingly incurable. I mean, that's the kind of person who's attracted to the program. So it's a very important investment, and it seems to work as designed. However, I also know that people can use this program and do it on their own because they did it with A Mind of Your Own, and it was less refined then. So yeah, I've decided to put the whole thing into the book, and the caveat being that I am a big, big believer that if you're tapering off of psych meds, you require community.
Yes.
And again, because I have done this one-on-one, I actually have just ended my one-on-one tapering practice after all these years to shift into a group model. That's how much I know that it's the proper way to do it. That there is a kind of existential isolation that can attend to the dark night of the soul, which is what characterizes the tapering process. It's a kind of painful awakening, and the yield is extraordinary. I mean, these individuals, I call them the canaries in the coal mine. I mean, they're exquisitely sensitive people who've been captured by psychiatry, and medicated and labeled, and learning how to work with that power. It's like an initiation process, right? And so it's not easy. But what comes out the other side, I mean, now there's so many of these individuals, they work in this mission, they heal other people, they establish nonprofits. I mean, it's just extraordinary. So, I feel very strongly that work is meant to be done in community. And so, and that coffee enemas are really for that population in my, application of the protocol. And so that is reserved for the communities that we have. But outside of that, the entire rest of it is in there. Yeah.
Got it. So coffee enemas are not in the book.
The Nick Gonzalez's instructions are not in the book. To me, that's a very sacred offering. I'm the only person who's ever been given that information, aside from his associate, Linda Isaacs, who practices still the protocol. And so for me, that's for people who are of a level of dedication. And I think it's also because nobody's coming to my protocol to treat their cancer, I don't think. So it's really for people who are in the pharmaceutical detox realm.
Got it.
I don't think they should be doing this on their own. And I don't think they need a doctor necessarily. I'm not suggesting that. It's not that tagline, like, please consult your medical professional. It's not that. But I do believe that they must do it in a like-minded community. And honestly, mine is one of the only ones in the world. So there aren't a ton of other options.
That's wonderful. So anyone can get your book and benefit from it. Those who are on some kind of pharmaceutical medication for mental, emotional and want to detox off of it in the healthiest way possible and support the body in restoring itself to optimal health mentally, emotionally, and physically, and spiritually and energetically, can
Yes.
do your online program, because then they have that community, they get the full detox
Yes.
protocol, they have the ongoing support through you. But everyone can start with the book, and then those who are called to can do your online
Yeah,
approach.
if that feels right, so the last third of the book is really about navigating kind of the awakening process. And what I found is, I haven't taken psychiatric medication myself, but that my primary credential in writing this book is that I myself have encountered the dark night of the soul several times, several turns around the spiral of my, process, and it looks the same. It looks the same, as it does for these patients. And so, this book, obviously, while I like to think of myself as really being in the corner of those who are looking to reclaim themselves from chronic disease labels, I also know that, there is an archetypal journey that those of us, who are interested in healing are being called towards. And I think it has more to do with adultification, right? And this concept of, I think some of us are just feeling like, God, I've got to get stronger. I've got to level up. I've got to get it together. And we think that means like applying more control and force to our current circumstances, but it can also mean, and perhaps it more accurately refers to this process of resolving childlike programs and impulses so that we can finally identify the locus of control within us. And that's where this idea, we brought up earlier around bodily sovereignty. There's a reason that some people don't believe in bodily sovereignty. There's a reason that some people believe that the state, for example, should have control over whether medications are injected into our bodies against our will. And it's because they still believe that there is an external authority that is infallible, right? And that knows best. And that sounds a whole lot like the parent we never had, right? And so we've parentified these institutions, and we kind of need them to be as good as we say they are, because otherwise our entire worldview falls apart and everything gets really scary. So what I hope to create is kind of a path to navigating this adultification process that helps to mitigate the emotional wreckage that can lead you running back up into the uterus, from the birth canal, right? And it's because we all go through the same stuff, as our worldview crumbles and we encounter its deficiencies and its bankruptcy. It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. So if we can grow our ability to be okay with not being okay, then we will weather it with grace and will come out the other side living in a world where things are meaningful inherently. Nothing is fundamentally bad. Everything is interesting, and we can bring curiosity where once there was only fear. It's just a more beautiful way to live, to be honest.
Oh, so well put. I could listen to you all day. You're so poetic. You get right to the point and you paint this picture that's so beautiful. I bet your book's amazing to read. If it's anything
I hope you think so.
yeah, if it's anything like how you talk, it's wonderful.
Well, it should be, because I wrote it.
There you go. I know you have to go really soon because you're going to pick your kids up from school, but I wanted to ask if you could give us some homework. You said before we hit record that there's this world-changing power of self-care, and that's part of the message that you teach. Can you give us some self-care homework?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, because, I imagine that some of the people listening either, have had encounters with psychiatry or know people, that they love who have. And in keeping with this identification of those individuals as being fundamentally very sensitive to powerful emotional states and energies, then odds are that they also feel very concerned about what's going on this planet, right? And there's so many potential points of advocacy. There's so many things that feel out of alignment, that feel wrong, so many ways that, we could contribute to different causes, and it can induce almost this paralysis, that is very disconnecting. It feels like, you're then disconnected from others, you're disconnected from your community, you're disconnected from yourself. And so the resolution to that in these individuals, I have found, is, as the Zen say, to simply chop wood, carry water, to make a sacred ritual out of caring for yourself and putting yourself as your number one priority every day. And I don't necessarily mean, as some like narcissistic exercise of getting what you want all the time. I mean, as if you were your own baby, how would you care for this newborn baby, right? How would you, sort of look at her adoringly? How would you bathe her? How would you feed her? How would you create the conditions for her relaxation? How would you, give her experiences of pleasure and joy? And this is what a radical act self-care can represent. The way that I institute, apply, and recommend self-care, it's about 2.5 hours of your day are going to be focused simply on caring for the organism that is you. And it also involves like other practices related to tending to our emotional selves. So, I'll give maybe one example of each. So in terms of a self-care practice that, gives a physical foundation, one of the very practical tools that I recommend is one that's operationalized in my programs that we get love letters about every day, all day, which is just changing your breakfast, right? So, I have a 30-day dietary protocol. It's a deep dive. It's no cheating, all this. But you can also just start your day with a mindful, loving attention to what you're eating for breakfast, and it can change your experience of your entire day. And, my most popular recommendation is this smoothie, recipe that I made up that tastes like chocolate milk, basically. So it's not even a green smoothie or anything that you would typically expect. And probably part of the reason why it feels good is because it has a lot of natural fat in it. And so many of the individuals who are attracted to this work have that reactive hypoglycemia, right? So self-care can look like that instead of, grabbing a bar, from your cabinet and running to your commute. But it can also look like changing the way in which you reflexively respond to your own inner turmoil, right? So in today's vernacular, we're calling it triggering, right? So to begin to learn about the emotional and physical signature of your trigger. So for me, when I am triggered, meaning that somebody sets me off, either an email I get or a look I get across the room or something that my partner says, or, my daughter wanting to say something to me at a time when I'm working or whatever it is, I get this kind of tightness in my chest. My heart might start to race a little bit. And then I have this urgent feeling like I need to communicate my own defense. Right. So I need to engage my intellect to persuade whomever it is that I'm right. And I think this is a pretty common signature. But now when I have that feeling, right, and that picture arises in my life, instead of just reflexively engaging in the other person as being the source of my problem, right, which is, of course, natural, right? We engage warfare. I have cultivated a practice, and I have many examples of what that practice can look like in the book, but I've cultivated a practice of turning towards myself. And it's not necessarily to fix myself or to make myself feel better. It's just to be with myself and not abandon myself emotionally in those moments. So, it can look like anything from putting your arms around your waist, and just sitting quietly for 30 seconds. Or it can look like a visualization exercise, like one I have used with my patients for many years, where you personify that feeling, that emotion that you're having as being felt and experienced by a small same-gendered child. And you kind of show up to that child who's having this experience with very, very simple languaging, right? So you say something like, oh gosh, this is so hard what you're feeling. I'm so sorry. It's totally okay. And you kind of say that kind of stuff to yourself, and it sounds ridiculous, and it sounds like, how could that help? And who has the time for that? And whatever. Trust me, I have brought literally dozens of patients from the brink of suicide with this kind of a practice. It's at once, very self-compassionate and self-forgiving, but moreover, it's a powerful way to cultivate what's often called witness consciousness, which is that adult consciousness that allows you to watch what's happening rather than getting sucked up into a childlike story about the good guy and the bad guy. And the cultivation of this witness consciousness is a superpower. It's ultimately what defines, I think, adult psychology, which has the capacity to hold the good and the bad in every single scenario, in every single person. And the more individuals that we have entering into this state of consciousness, the closer we will come to an experience of peace on this planet. I literally believe that. So it starts with self-care.
Oh, this is the path to peace on the planet, when we can take 30 seconds when we're triggered and
Yes.
and practice self-compassion, self-forgiveness, and
Yes.
have that witness consciousness to kind of soothe that child inside us that just wants to wage war. Can you imagine if politicians did this?
I know. They don't have to, because if enough of us do, the shift will happen. I really, really believe that. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't be writing our legislators and everything else, but it's resonant. It's a resonant phenomenon. So as, because again, remember, I have a big mouth and I like to think I'm right. And I like to exercise that on an intellectual level and go out with all my studies and all this. And I didn't have, the potential impact that I might have today simply taking care of myself. And every time I get sucked up into an issue, and I feel like, God, this can't be, this is wrong, or whatever it is. I now know, no, Kelly, chop wood, carry water. Did you go to dance class today? Did you eat breakfast? Maybe a different meditation this morning. It's literally on that level that I have the confidence that I will begin to attract others to this way of being. And I don't think we all have to be this way in order to create this more beautiful world experience that we can all inhabit.
Oh, Kelly, you are so congruent and compassionate, and I love that you are the example that we can learn from, and that you have that compassion, because you've also, like you said, you've had the dark night of the soul, and you are vulnerable in sharing and then teaching us and helping us. I'd love for all of us to be you when we grow up.
Oh, please. I don't know about that. That may not lead us to peace in the world. But.
Well, we'd carry a big stick, that's for sure. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show. Please come back on the show again and teach us more. We'd love to have you back. It's been wonderful. Listeners can go to kellybroganmd.com. Of course, all the links that Kelly has to everything that Kelly does is in the show notes of today's podcast at learntruehealth.com. Dr. Kelly Brogan, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your beautiful energy. I really appreciate it and appreciate this conversation.
Hello, true health seeker. Have you ever thought about becoming a health coach? Do you love learning about nutrition and how we can shift our lifestyle and our diet so that we can gain optimal health and happiness and longevity? Do you love helping your friends and family to solve their health problems and to figure out what they can do to eat healthier? Are you interested in becoming someone who can grow their own business, support people in their success? Do you love helping people? You might be the perfect candidate to become a health coach. I highly recommend checking out the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. I just spent the last year in their health coaching certification program, and it really blew me away. It was so amazing. I learned over 100 dietary theories. I learned all about nutrition, but from a standpoint of how we can help people to shift their life and shift their lifestyle to gain true holistic health. I definitely recommend you check them out. You can Google Institute for Integrative Nutrition, or IIN, and give them a call, or you can go to learntruehealth.com/coach, and you can receive a free module of their training to check it out and see if it's something that you'd be interested in. Be sure to mention my name, Ashley James, and the Learn True Health podcast, because I made a deal with them that they will give you the best price possible. I highly recommend checking it out. It really changed my life to be in their program, and I'm such a big advocate that I wanted to spread this information. We need more health coaches. In fact, health coaching is the largest growing career right now in the health field. So many health coaches are getting in and helping people, because you can work in chiropractic offices, doctors' offices, you can work in hospitals, you can work online through Skype and help people around the world. You can become an author, you can go into the school system and help your local schools shift their programs to help children be healthier. You can go into senior centers and help them to shift their diet and lifestyle to best support them in their success and their health goals. There's so many different available options for you when you become a certified health coach. So check out IIN, check out the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, mention my name, get the best deal, give them a call, and they'll give you lots of free information and help you to see if this is the right move for you. Classes are starting soon. The next round of classes are starting at the end of the month. So you're going to want to call them now and check it out. And if you know anyone in your life who would be an amazing coach, please tell them about it. Being a health coach is so rewarding, and you get to help so many people.